Hi everybody. In this video, what I'm going to be looking at is the impact of subsidies on markets. So this is looking at 1.2.9 from the specification. So we've done in a previous video the impacts of taxes in markets, so indirect taxes. We're now going to be looking at the impact of subsidies in markets. Right, okay, now let's think first of all then about what a subsidy is. And what I'm going to say first of all is that what we are looking at here are the impacts of producer subsidies. So what we're going to be showing is that what happens when the government give grants to businesses. Okay, so this is the opposite of an indirect tax. Rather than taking money from businesses, we've now got the government giving money to businesses. Okay, so they've been granted money to hopefully incentivize an increase in production. Now, when you look at the diagram here, we've shown the impact of a subsidy on markets. They will make the supply curve shift outwards. Okay, now look what that does to the market then. It will take the market equilibrium from P1, Q1 out to P2, Q2. So what subsidies do? They have the impact of bringing down the market price and helping the market to grow. The vertical distance between the supply curves is the subsidy per unit. Now think about why they will make supply move outwards. What we know is that when costs of production fall for businesses, it will incentivize an outward shift in supply, with the reason being that the original market equilibrium price of P1, there's now an increased ability to generate profit because the government are in effect picking up some of your costs. Okay, so if they were to say for every unit of output that you sell, here's £10 or £5, we're lowering the cost of producing each individual unit of output. So why do governments give subsidies to firms? Well, there's a few different possible reasons we can go for. It could just be that these particular products that we're subsidising could be deemed to be beneficial for society. So this could be things such as healthcare or education or public transport. So if you make these things cheaper, then you're going to get that extension in demand. So if you want more people to go to university, exercise more, work out more, etc., go swimming more, then if you make these things cheaper, then people become more willing and able to do it. So it's a form of intervention really from the government in the workings of a free market economy. You make these things cheaper, then more people will do more of them. Now, it could also help out people on low incomes. So if we want people who are from poor backgrounds to be able to access better housing, then we can put subsidies on housing to make them more affordable. If we want people from poorer backgrounds to be able to access better transport or utilities such as electricity and gas, then subsidies will make these things cheaper, which means that they're going to do more of them. So they help the market grow for these particular products. It could also be to discourage people from doing other things. So we looked at cross-elasticity of demand, for example. If we want more people to give up driving their car and go on public transport, maybe to ease congestion on roads or to reduce pollution levels from car emissions, we'll make buses and trains more affordable and people become more willing and able to do it. And another reason could just simply be that we want to protect or help the industry grow. It could be that it creates lots of jobs. And if you were to subsidise it, you're going to increase more production and therefore create more jobs in these industries. Now, it's worth noting in the diagram, everyone, that the yellow area here will show the total cost of the subsidy to the government. And we're going to be looking at this area of total cost of the subsidy to the government later on in the video. Right, what I would now like to do, please, is to look at question 1. A, what is a subsidy? B, why do governments grant subsidies? And then C, use a diagram to show the impact on markets of the introduction of a producer subsidy. So what I'd like to now do, please, is to hit pause, put down the answer for this overall question in your books, and when you're comfortable with your answer, hit play and carry on. So hit pause now, please, and when you're ready again to carry on, please hit play. Right, everyone, welcome back. Now, in this diagram here, we can show what we call the incidence of the producer subsidy. In other words, who benefits from that subsidy in the marketplace? Now, when you look at this diagram on the right-hand side of the page, the vertical distance between the supply curve, so that's A to C, would show the subsidy per unit. So look what this subsidy is. It's taken the market from equilibrium at P1Q1 to equilibrium at P2Q2. So the market is grown, there's an increase in supply, and that will bring down price levels in the marketplace, which would extend demand. So the subsidy per unit is A to C, and that will be applied to every unit of output sold from 0 to Q2. So the total cost of the subsidy to the government is the area A to C to P2 to P3. So look again, A to C, that's the subsidy per unit, and that is multiplied by the quantity. So we've got here C all the way back to P2. Right, what we can then show is who benefits from the subsidy. Well, the proportion of that subsidy which benefits the consumer is the proportion that leads to a direct reduction in price. So look what's happened. The price has fallen from P1 to P2, and that will then be applied to the whole area C to B. Okay, so that proportion there is the proportion of the subsidy which will benefit the consumer. P1 to B to C to P2. Now, what you'll notice is that when we introduce a subsidy, the selling price will not fall by the full proportion of the subsidy, because the firm will keep back some of the benefit for itself. So the firm will keep A to B, P1 to P3. Now, what confuses people here, that when we drew the indirect tax diagram, it was the top proportion of the tax, which is what affected the consumer. It was the bottom proportion which affected the producer. What we're now doing, we're flipping them round. The top proportion is what benefits the producer, and the bottom section is what benefits the consumer. And what we'll do later in the video, we'll look at some numerical examples to think about what we've got here. Right, now, just to sort of take stock on what we've done now in this previous diagram, I would now like you to put down your answer for this question. So use a diagram to show the producer benefit of a subsidy and the consumer benefit of a subsidy. So hit pause now, please, and when you're happy, please hit play, and we'll move on with the rest of the video. So hit pause, please. Right, everyone, welcome back. Right, what I'm now going to show you is this. Right, so we're going to look at a numerical example of the impacts of a subsidy in marketplace. Right, now the idea is the original market equilibrium price was £12, and the market demand and supply was in equilibrium at 10 at that equilibrium price. Now what we've done here, we've introduced a subsidy per unit of £8. So every unit of output that is now produced in this marketplace, the government will pay the business £8. Well, that has the impact of bringing down the market price to £6, and the new equilibrium will therefore be at 15. So look what's happened. The subsidy, it's brought down the market price, and the market is grown because of the subsidy. Right, well, let's now think then about the total cost of the subsidy. So I'm just going to shade that box in pink, incidence of subsidy. Now, this area here would show us the cost of the subsidy to the government. So what we know is the area A to B on this diagram here would show the subsidy per unit of £8, and that is multiplied to all 15 units of output in the marketplace. So 15 times 8 would be £120. So the subsidy will cost the government £120. Now what we can now show is what proportion of that will benefit the consumer and what proportion will benefit the producer. So this orange bit here would show the benefits of the subsidy that go on to the consumer. So what we know is the selling price in the market will fall from £12 to £6. So £6 out of that £8 subsidy will be passed on to the consumer in terms of a lower price. And that will then be applied to all 15 units of output. So the proportion of subsidy which will benefit the consumer will be £90 in total. Now the proportion which benefits the producer is this top bit here. So £2 out of that £8 subsidy will in effect line the pockets of the business, and that will again be applied to all 15 units of output. So 2 times 15 would be £30. Right, okay, now look at the bottom box again in that table. Put it in blue to make it stand out. What we know is the consumer benefit from the subsidy works out to be 90 out of £120. So that is 75% will go to the consumer. The producer will pick up the remaining £30. So they're going to be picking up the remaining 25% of that subsidy. Okay, right, and I want to think about how elasticity will affect this. So let me now show you this one here. Okay, so what we've got here, hopefully you can see that we've got a very price inelastic demand. So when we introduce a subsidy this time, the market price will fall from £10 down to £6. But the market will only grow from 50 to 52. Now, what you might argue is if this subsidy was designed to encourage, more consumption and more production, it's not really had the desired impact that we would like it to. It's had a very insignificant increase in the market size. So look what we've got then. Now, what I've done here, by the way, I've calculated the price elasticity just to prove that demand is price inelastic. Now look what happens to this subsidy. We've lowered the price from £10 to £6. So this is a 40% reduction in the selling price. But demand only grows from 50 to 52, which works out to be a 4% increase in demand. So if I use the PD formula now, percent change in demand divided by percent change in price, I've got 4 divided by minus 40. So I've got a score of minus 0.1. Remember, anything between 0 and minus 1 would signal a price inelastic demand. So this is extremely price inelastic. Okay, so we now want to be thinking about, well, what is the incidence of the subsidy? Who benefits the most, the producer or the consumer, when we introduce a subsidy in this marketplace? Right, now, first things first, be quite careful with this. Right, now this pink area here would show the cost of the subsidy to the government. Now it's worth noting that what we've got here from A to C is the subsidy per unit. So we're now giving in the marketplace a subsidy per unit of £4.50. So every unit of output produced by firms in this marketplace will carry a £4.50 subsidy. Well, the total cost of the subsidy would be the 52 multiplied by that £4.50. So 52 multiplied by £4.50 will give us a total subsidy cost of the government of £234. Right, what we can now show is who benefits from that subsidy. So let's think first of all about the consumer benefit. So remember, the consumer benefits from the reduction in price. So look what happens. The price has fallen from £10 to £6. So that's £4 that goes to the consumer. That's multiplied by the 52 in the market that's bought and sold, which means £208 will go directly to the consumer in terms of lower price savings. The producer will benefit from the top section of the subsidy. So that is this green area, the top remaining bit. Okay, so the remaining 50p, the gap between £10.50 and £10, is what goes to the producer. So they will get 52 lots of 50p, so £26. Right, so again, those two shaded areas now, the orange and the green, would show the total cost of the subsidy to the government, which we now know is £234. So look what happens then. We know that £208 will go directly to the consumer. So 208 out of 234 would work out to be a percentage of 88.9% of that subsidy will go directly to the consumer. The remaining 11.1% is what goes to the producer. So what we can see is that when demand is price inelastic, the subsidy will mainly benefit the consumer. And there's got to be a significant reduction in price to signal a growth in the market size. Okay, so when you've got inelastic demand, subsidy will mainly benefit the consumer in terms of a massive reduction in price. But you can argue it's a fairly ineffective subsidy because it will have a very minimal impact on the size of the marketplace. Let's now contrast that with what happens when demand is price elastic. So you can see here we've got a very flat demand curve. So here demand is very responsive to a change in price. And we can see here what's happened. We've introduced a subsidy this time which has brought the selling price down from £10 to £8. That has led to the market growing from 50 at the original equilibrium point to 150. So if we work out the percentage change in demand now, demand has grown by 200%. Price has fallen by 20%. So if I do the change in demand divided by the percent change in price, I've got 200% divided by minus 20%, which gives a score of minus 10, a really price elastic demand curve. Right, now what we've introduced this time, again, if you look at the diagram then, vertical distance between the supply curves is the subsidy per unit. So we've got here £4.50 subsidy per unit. Now again, if we were to show the total cost of that subsidy to the government, it's going to be all this orange area here. The subsidy per unit multiplied by the number of products in the marketplace. Look, we've got 150 lots of £4.50, which will give us £675. So this subsidy will cost the government £675. Right, and we're now going to be thinking about then what proportion will benefit the consumer and what proportion benefits the producer. So the consumer member will benefit from the reduction in price, which is that pink area there. So the price falls by £2. That is applied to their 150 units of output. So the subsidy that will go to the consumer will be £300 worth. The producer will benefit from the remaining section. So that bit will be in green. So they keep the remaining £2.50 on every unit of output sold, multiplied across the 150. So 150 lots of £2.50 would come to £375. So what happens now then? When demand's elastic and we look at the incidence of the subsidy at the bottom, we can see in blue the consumer will benefit from £300 out of that £675 in total. That's 44.4%. The producer will benefit from the remaining 55.6%. So what we therefore know then is that when demand is price elastic, it will be mainly the consumer that benefits from that subsidy. You could also argue here that the subsidy has been more effective this time. It's led to a significant growth in the market. Remember, subsidies are designed to make people consume more of something. Well, when demand's price elastic, the subsidies can be really, really effective at raising the demand in this marketplace. Right, what I now want to do is just to go back to this PowerPoint presentation. So what we've been through this diagram, looking at who benefits from subsidies. We've been looking at who benefits the most when demand was price inelastic. And we said that the benefit will be felt mainly by the consumer. There's a significant reduction in price. But we'd argue that's not a very effective subsidy because the market's only grown by a very small amount. When demand was more elastic, we saw that the benefit of the subsidy seemed to benefit the producer more. So more of it will go into the pockets of the producer. But the subsidy here is potentially more effective because it would lead to a significant growth in the demand in this marketplace. Right, just to end this, what I want you to think about question 3. So A, use a diagram to help you explain why producers gain the most from a subsidy when demand is price elastic. B, use a diagram to help you explain why consumers gain the most from a subsidy when demand is price inelastic. C, use a diagram to help you explain why producers and consumers share the benefits of a subsidy equally when demand is price unitary. Now, I've not shown you that diagram, but you should be able to work it out. When you work out the incidence of subsidy, if demand is price unitary, well, the subsidy should be 50% towards the consumers and 50% towards the producers. And then finally, D, with reference to PED, when do you think subsidies are the most effective? Well, for that one, you're going to be thinking about what is the purpose of a subsidy. And if we're thinking about what the purpose is, when will we achieve that purpose the most? So when will subsidies be the most effective? So guys, if you can hit pause now, put down your answers, and then when you finish with these questions, you've also finished with the video. Thank you very much.